They're very spiritually brought up, spiritually grounded, and they're not brought up in a Christian sense, but they are, like, the assumptions that they make are different than the assumptions that your average American makes, or just different than other people, and they will err on the side of spiritual, ethereal things that are, I think, most important eventually. And they consider those things to be very important. They're not very materialistic, just kind of as a general rule. And when they are, like when they do have things, it's not the same. Like, it's not so much about the things. And so I really admire that about them, and it made them, you could have a different conversation with them because of that. And of course, there's really spiritual people, and in Western culture, there's really materialistic people. In Navajo culture, people are just people. In the end, it's really who it is that you're talking to that's important. But as a general rule, you could have like a different conversation with them, which was nice. And they're interesting because they're different than the people you're teaching in the valley, because they don't have a Christian background. They have a native background and really like rich traditional background, or just a very, very unique background of witch doctory and sorcery and legends. And they someone explained like part of their theology to me at one point, and they worship these 4 mountains, and or they pray to these 4 mountains. I'm not sure they worship them, and they're big into stars. Stars are like representative of ancestors. They're big into ancestors. They're super superstitious, very superstitious, like crazy, insane superstitious. And then you get a couple different types of. Now you have you have traditional Navajos, which are really, really interesting to talk to. And everyone's getting kind of integrated anyway, but the people who like religiously believed in Navajo tradition. And then you get people who are like just American, kind of agnostic, atheist type people, where they're just kind of becoming American. And that, I really have that much to say about them. And then then with members of the church, you'd run into 2 really interesting things. You'd run into people who were as normal members of the church, but they really struggle. I don't know what it is about Navajo culture, but they really struggle with leaving some of the cultural, especially the religious cultural things, which I suppose is understandable, and it's harsh for me to say because I've grown up a member of the church. But it's like, it's nigh unto, and definitely not as bad, but the way that I've seen it work in their lives, it's almost like an addiction, or it acts kind of like an addiction, where it's kind of like resurges and tries to take them away from Christian practices and from, well, I don't know, just a lot of things that are good for them. And so it's really weird that way, that I think a lot of the temptation for them is to cling to, and there's a lot of things in our culture that's good that they should cling to, but there's a lot that's really not good. Like I was talking about, like they're really kind of entrenched in sorcery and things like that, which has some really pretty poor consequences. And the temptation for them is to hold on to those things. And so you run into these members of the church that are like kind of halvesies, like they're like, oh, I'm Mormon, but then I maintain my traditional beliefs too, which is just an ignorant statement, because they're just so very not compatible. Well, some bits of them again are mostly like moral bits, but if you're actually going into like metaphysics or things like that, like it's just absolutely contradictory. So there's a really, really interesting thing there in Flagstaff.